Welcome to the Helicopter Podcast, your go-to source for all things rotorcraft. I'm Halsey Scheider, bringing you the stories, insights, and conversations from around the helicopter industry. Whether you're a seasoned pilot, a maintainer, or you're just passionate about helicopters, this is the podcast for you. What was the aircraft that you were flying in?
412.
Yeah, the 412.
Yeah.
Dual patient capability, right?
Actually, 4 patient capability in case of a mass casualty. The most we ever did was actually, it was funny, not funny, haha, but funny, interesting, is that we flew during one of the hurricanes. We went down to UTMB and we were helping evacuate their NICU. We had 9 souls on board when we called off that day, and everybody, because we had all those kids lined up on the litters, and just to evacuate and bring them to Children's Hospital in San Antonio.
Incredible.
Yeah, so it was a good program, great mission. You know, you get really spoiled when you're in an aircraft that it is like a pickup truck. Yep. You know, the 412 is a beast.
This episode of the Helicopter Podcast is made possible with the generous sponsorship from Hillsboro Heli Academy, Metro Aviation, and Precision Aviation Group. Guys, what's going on? It's Halsey Scheider with the Helicopter Podcast, and we are coming at you from Cologne, Germany. I got the red light on, which means I'm recording. I got Steve Soliz with me. We just talked for like 2 minutes, and we thought we were podcasting, but you know, the Roadcaster, Steve, doesn't work very well when you don't press record.
That's right.
It's the second time I've done that. Luckily, it's been only just a couple minutes in. So, Steve, I apologize for the rookie move there. These intro podcasts are still a little foreign, right? We usually do the online, so bear with me. But we were just talking about a little bit of my experience with Bell. Steve, of course, is with Bell. Big fan of the 407. That's kind of well, actually, my first Bell experience was a Jet Ranger. Mm-hmm. Love the Jet Ranger.
Yep.
I was flying a Jet Ranger at Mount St. Helens, out of all places.
Wow. Doing
tours. We would fly all the way up to the top of the crater and back. I think we're about 10,000 feet, altitude, and man, we would make it right up there, no problem. I actually flew a Long Ranger for Air Medical, which was actually awesome. I flew at several bases in Texas that were still using the Long Ranger, and then I got moved to the 407. So my last full-time flying gig was Air Medical in the 407. An incredible product. So fun to fly. And yeah, as I was mentioning, I love selling Bell helicopters. A lot of Jet Rangers, a lot of Long Rangers, and a lot of 407s. I haven't sold a 429 before.
Oh, well, it's still early.
So I need to, I've been doing this for 8 years. Yeah. I don't know. It's like the 429 is like my great white buffalo.
All right.
So I got to figure out how to do that, but I'm confident in myself.
Absolutely.
And after the show, I'm actually going down to Air Zermatt, who's in your booth. Daniel was on the podcast last year, and he's like, "Oh, if you're ever in Europe, come visit." And so I called his bluff. I'm going to go and hang out there in Zermatt for a few days, and maybe even do a little flying. So
you won't be disappointed. It's gorgeous there. They have an amazing mission. I'm a big fan of Air Zermatt too, not just because they're big Bell proponents and customers, but they have a very unique mission. These guys, I come over there with my background and my knowledge of EMS and trauma in the United States, and I come here, and these guys are doing so many flights at such high altitude. They're doing over 1,000 hoists a year, 80% of them operational, 20% about training. And I'm like, do you guys do this? Do you guys carry this? And here in Europe, there's a really different vibe on mission capabilities because they're not as competitive as they are in the U.S.
Interesting.
And so these guys will not carry something if there's no data to support it. They won't carry Lucas devices. They won't carry whole blood. They won't do any of this stuff. They won't be doing in-flight ultrasounds, fast exams, or anything like that because it doesn't make any sense. And I love that, actually, practicality.
Even the blood part?
Even the blood part.
Interesting.
Yeah. And, it's very controversial, too. So, like, every year, Air Zermatt has this thing called the Big Sick Conference. It's every February. It's held there, and it's mostly physicians and paramedics that attend this. And Bell's a big sponsor of it every year. And they talk about, carrying whole blood, and they don't think that it's the right thing to do in most of Europe. They only think the UK does it because they're trying to be, get close to the U.S. type of medical policies, and they think that just blood components is good enough, like plasma
Sure.
or packed cells or this or that, and which is really interesting. And I love hearing that, because no one's really wrong.
Yeah.
What works for your mission and if your outcomes
Yeah,
are
of
what they
course.
need to be, that's good for you.
What's your take on blood, though?
Well, I come back, where I come from in San Antonio, we actually have the
Oh, that's
Institute.
where I flew.
Yeah, the Institute of Surgical Research there, and with the U.S. Army. And so they did a lot of the blood studies, and they do stuff on. I was actually with San Antonio Airlife for years, and so we started flying with whole blood approximately, I'll say, like over 10 years ago.
Wow.
We started flying with it and started the program.
Great program there, by the way.
And yeah, R.I.P.
Yeah.
And and the study showed that we were really making a difference. And at one point we actually even were part of a blood replacement study that started and stopped because it wasn't going where it needed to be. So geography played a lot in my experience. Being around really, really smart people doing a lot of good research and work helped bleed over into my aviation career.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, we had an experience at our base where the guy got his leg lobbed off in a pipe jack or something in the oil field, and then crew went and picked him up, put his leg on ice, gave him blood. He survived, and then the San Antonio News actually did a story on it and the importance of carrying whole blood and things like that. I'm just a meat servo up front, so I leave the medical stuff to the professionals. But I was actually so impressed when I got into air medical. I didn't understand what a paramedic was, what a nurse was, especially in that type of trauma setting. I have this belief, I think probably a lot of people do, it's like, doctors are like the highest level of care or whatever. And then I go into this new setting and I'm seeing these nurses and paramedics do these incredible things. And we're going into little hospitals and the doctor's looking at them like, you intubate them. Yep. I don't want to do it. I'm a foot doctor and I'm just getting paid to be here,
Absolutely.
And I just have so much respect for the men and women that sit in the back of helicopters and work on people. I think it's a bit of a thankless job at times. I think the pay could probably be a little bit better because just the skill and the professionalism. I mean, that was the most incredible part. I mean, I never once at my time, I worked for Air Evac. Never once did I have an experience where I didn't see a medical professional not being professional. I mean, they're just top notch.
Yeah, you're right. And actually, that's part of the evolution of air medical, right, in the United States. I do part of what I do at Bell. My main job essentially is consulting. Whenever we have a salesperson that's going to sell an air ambulance, and I work with the customers on configuration options and stuff like that. But most of the time, I will be a brand ambassador and I'll go ahead and give presentations. And one of the things I present on is North American HEMS and the history of it. And part of that evolution is, to your point, like you were talking about, in rural hospitals, there's a foot doctor, because before they started mandating that they had to be board certified, emergency medicine physicians in the ERs or nurse practitioners, you never knew what you were going to do when you showed up. There was always a story that they were going to say they were stable, you're going to show up and they're half dead, or they said they're critical and they're fine, because they just kind of, EMS has like a kind of belief system and a drive to let's make my problem somebody else's problem as soon as possible. I need to clear this patient out of here and then get him on the helicopter or on the ground ambulance and out of here. And so, we had these teams started training, and doing cadaver labs. We were doing cadaver labs in the 90s with the company I was with. It was actually called Critical Air, and they were bought out by Aerovac.
Yeah, Mark Fisher.
Yeah, Mark Fisher was. We flew together.
Yeah, Mark Fisher was my RDFO at Air Evac.
Yeah.
My experience with Mark, man, he was like one of the best managers that I ever had. I'll tangent for a second because I think one of the really things that I loved about my experience with Air Medical was the support of our leadership.
Yeah.
I felt like back maybe when I was still a kid, air medical was quite dangerous. And a big part of it was this mission pressure and this pilots being forced to fly when they shouldn't.
Right.
And man, at Air Evac, that was not the case. And Mark was like the guy that, he stood on that, right? There wasn't ever a situation. I had one situation where a program director called a base next to mine and asked that pilot if he would have taken the flight that I just declined. And Mark didn't go for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
You can't create that kind of environment.
That type of behavior. And you know, Mark would talk about it. But then to actually see him in action and go after that program director, I mean, talk about feeling empowered, right? I mean, as a pilot and feeling like, oh my gosh, you know, they truly practice what they preach. So yeah, Mark Fisher, thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Yeah, Mark's a great guy. You know, I flew with him in Arizona at Wilcox, Arizona. And, you know, it's kind of like right there off of I-10 coming into Arizona from New Mexico.
Yep.
A lot of huge open area, a lot of bad trauma we saw out there. And I really enjoyed flying with him. I learned a lot of principles from him. And, you know, back then, too, there was a lot of siloing, too. You know, there was a feeling that the medical crew were,
big time.
You know, were like self-loading baggage.
Oh, big time.
And then, you know, the pilots were essentially taxi drivers. And as you're aware now, you know, we're totally integrated and having a good SMS system and having this honesty and these crew briefs, and you're going over emergency procedures and you're having these discussions really increases the safety level of your operations.
Important. Yeah,
you have to have it.
I feel very fortunate because, you know, I came into air medical at the perfect time. You know, the changes had already been done at that time. Air Evac had essentially updated all their aircraft to have the 2-axis autopilot, the Garmin, you know, G500, both in the Long Ranger and the 407. And even at our Neo, we did a full week of the crew resource management. They called it something different, AMRAM.
AMRAM, yep.
And I don't remember what it stands for, but that was, you know, they really set the tone, you know, and then for me, I believed it. I believed that, man, if there's 2 people in the back, that's a 4 more set, you know, eyes that can be out there and help. And I've talked about this on the podcast before, but we got called to Dilley. I'm sure you're familiar with Dilley.
Yep.
And
you land in a cemetery there.
Yeah, exactly. And man, someone threw a tower up. It wasn't charted. It wasn't on our Air Evac. Even had like a list of uncharted. You know, we plotted, and we're coming in. It's a pre-approved landing area that we've done before, and we're going in at night doing the same thing. Russell Monroe in the back, paramedic, goes tower, you know, and right when he said it, I see it.
Wow.
And so I veer off to the right, missed it, land it. Would I would have hit it? I don't know. It would have been really close. You know, and so this idea of using your crew to enhance the safety of the flight, I mean, it just makes sense to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
I think it's just the old school mentality, right? Of, you know, pilots know best or whatnot. It's, you know, often not the case.
Yeah, it was to your point earlier about physicians. You know, we don't fly with physicians for the most part in North America, you know, because we train up our nurses and paramedics to a certain level.
Yeah.
And actually training up our crew members to have this conversation and have this trust within each other, and don't be calling out, you know, objects that are 3 miles out. You know.
Yeah, of course.
You know what's reality and based on our mission.
Yeah.
And you know we've seen, and you've probably heard about these and got some debriefs lately of some near misses that have happened in the last year with their medical programs, and it's very, very important for everybody to be talking. You know, as a pilot, we're trying to focus on decreasing the pilot workload and having those crew members to help with that while they're on the radio and you got your eyes out the window, especially in critical phases of flight. You know,
and that's what I loved about Air Evac and the Bell product specifically that they were using. Again, they had upgraded the cockpits. You know, they were legacy 407s, and then either like an L1 plus or L3 plus, I guess, or just a flat L4, but all upgraded. And, being able to have, that was my first experience with autopilot, my first experience in a glass cockpit, to have those tools available. I mean, it's like I had a second pilot, right?
Right.
To be able to, put on the HeliCASTS, be able to see the screens, be able to see the traffic right there. Changing frequencies was so easy. Everything was so ergonomic. I mean, that right there frees you up as a pilot so much to get your eyes outside. And I know the technology is only getting better, right? Bell continues to have, better avionic packages, and it's I think that's a big lifesaver. But then integrating the crew on top of that, I mean, it's just the cherry on top, right? So.
Thank you to our sponsor, Metro Aviation. Metro Aviation, the world's largest family-owned aeromedical operator, offers comprehensive aircraft services with 140 plus aircraft in over 25 states. The Completion Center installs medical and law enforcement kits and avionics, serving diverse aviation needs including offshore, utility, VIP, and corporate sectors.
Yeah, actually going from transitioning from an L3 or an L4 to an aircraft with a FADEC that helps keep you from over-torquing, right? So that keeps your aircraft up in the ground, up in the air.
Yeah.
You don't want to be AOG because you have some guys. I mean, I could tell you probably 10 times in my career when I was flying in a 206 L3 how many over-torques we've had, either in training or in real missions. And then there you go.
Yeah,
you're done.
You don't want to over torque. I've sadly over torqued once. Never talked about it publicly. I was in a Jet Ranger. This would be a good story. Why not? And it was actually I decided that I was going to focus solely on my sales business. It's called HeliCASTS, and I was going to put all my eggs in that basket. And it was on my last air medical flight. I was coming into San Antonio, and we're talking on, just talking on common traffic frequency. And the news helicopter was flying. I'm like, oh, maybe that could be a fun very part-time job. As I transitioned into full-time business for myself. So I'm chatting with the guy on the radio, and he's like, yeah, we actually need a part-time pilot right now. Call me, here's my number. And so anyway, I got hired by Heli Inc. to fly the Jet Ranger. And it was supposed to be like 3 or 4 days a month. Finished trading. Next day, the guy has a heart attack that's flying the main contract. He lived, luckily. But he lost his medical. So they're like, we need you flying full-time. And I was like, oh, no, So I ended up going full-time for about 8 months. And on, I think, my third day, I'm flying the Jet Ranger. And they had kind of rigged the collective tension wrong. I had always actually been taught in a bell, I could leave my hand on my thigh. Set it, hold my power. And I'm doing a descent. The friction was set wrong, and it migrated up. Oh, yeah. And all of a sudden, I start to hear this, and I look down, and I over-torqued it really well.
Wow.
And that was the only time I had never done anything in a helicopter to hurt a helicopter.
Right.
And I did it then. And that, whether it was, my fault or not, I mean, I felt like it was my fault. And it was like a job that was like this part-time thing, but I was still so upset with myself. Like, man, this is I have one job.
Yep.
Don't over-torque the helicopter.
Absolutely.
Sure enough, I did it, but it happens. I guess.
You learn, and you probably maybe some processes changed after that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think it's easy, especially when you have a lot of time. You find areas of complacency, right? And it's just little things that you get away with over time, and then at one point it bites you.
Absolutely.
And to my fortune, all it did was over torque. No one died. Helicopter was fine. They had to spend some money and do an inspection, and that sucks too. But
right, yeah.
It is what it is. But enough about me.
All right.
Obviously, if you haven't figured it out yet with our conversation, you have a background in medical.
Yes.
Right? That's really that's your background. So I'm just kind of curious, how did you start your career of being medical in helicopters? Was that something that you were drawn to? Like that's why you got into emergency medicine?
Yeah.
Or did it just kind of happen out of luck?
It was actually a little bit of both. I'm going to tell you, I've actually told this story before. Actually, I tell a lot of people this story because I'm essentially in the twilight of my career.
Love it.
So I can say, I went to college and I wasn't ready for college. And so my freshman year of college, I spent a lot of time playing intramural soccer and drinking a lot of beer.
I was going to say, if there's any drinking?
Yes. And so after the second semester at the University of North Texas, so actually at the time it was North Texas State University in Denton.
I went to a football game there because I was doing training with MedTrans.
Right on. Yeah.
My 407 check ride.
Yeah, it's right up the road there.
Yeah, I went to a UNT game. It was fun.
Yeah, so then I flunked out. And so I went back home, and I knew that I had capability. I just knew I wasn't ready for school yet. And I felt kind of pressured because like all my classmates were applying for colleges and they were going to college, and I really
did. What you're supposed to do.
Yeah, you're supposed to do that, right? I joined the Air Force Reserves. I was like, I need something. I need some discipline. I need I need to get myself back into it. And so my dad was a retired Army guy.
Okay.
And so I grew up kind of like in a strict environment of that stuff,
Sure.
Good rails on my daily activities. And so I joined the Air Force Reserves because I figured that if it was terrible, I could make it one weekend a month for X amount of time.
Yeah, of course.
And if I really, really loved it, I could stay in or go active duty. And so when I went in there, my aptitude test was pretty good. And so the guy said, you can pick any job you want to pick. So one of the jobs that they were offering a bonus in was an aeromedical evacuation technician. And I was like, what's this? And he said, you're a medic and you fly in back of a plane. You fly all over the world.
Wow.
And I was like, sold. Had never even thought about medical at all.
Really?
Yeah. And then once I took off and started doing my training, I took to it like a fish in water.
I love that.
Yeah.
I like that you say that, and I like that story because it's kind of a common theme on this podcast is about what I call flexibility, career flexibility.
Oh, yeah.
Being open and understanding when there's an opportunity.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a lot of people, I was this way. I was very centered of what I was going to do, right? I was going to be a pilot. I knew my path. I wasn't going to derail from that path, but life had different plans, and I did derail from my traditional path. But then that led me into helicopters by complete accident. And now I sit here in a career of now 18 years coming up on of being around and in helicopters and having a life that I never imagined, right? And it's because I had flexibility and when the opportunity presented itself, I took it. And a lot of young people listen to the podcast, and I think it's a nice life lesson to, hey, you have goals, have some things that you want to do, but, be flexible, right?
Yeah, you really have to. And part of it is, it's kind of like an old trope about, you skin a knee, get back up, and dust yourself off. But, you got to stay driven, even if
100%.
Your dream is to be an astronaut, and, those are pretty high expectations. But you could still be in aviation. You could still be, an aeronautical engineer. There's so many things you can do if you can't really make it to that level, but you can still stay in that vein. And so it's just a learning principle, and then I was in there and I was a medic, and then I was working around all these nurses, and I was like, these guys, they're getting saluted. They're officers. They're getting paid more. So then I went to nursing school and got my degree. And then because of my experience in the military, when I was flying at Children's Hospital there in San Antonio, they offered me a position on the transport team to fly. And that's how I started flying on fixed wing and rotor wing there. And then it just transitioned.
So it's started in the Air Force, go that route. Great place to get training, by the way. Obviously, paid training, which is a good way to do it. You become a nurse, and then your civilian foray into helicopters is through CHOSA, essentially. And you're on the specialty team. And that's kind of an interesting, our listeners may not understand that, but it's, we have, say, traditional air medical that I flew, right? Where I show up to a base, I have a paramedic, a nurse, and a pilot, and we go and we fly these air medical missions. And then other teams, like the pediatric, thank you. You're like a full-time hospital employee, right? But if there is a baby that needs help or a mom that's having a difficult pregnancy, they put you guys on the helicopter and you go. It's pretty cool. Yeah,
and it was pretty dynamic because we didn't own or operate any aircraft. We actually were taken by rotor wing at first by the military. They actually had a base there at BAMC at the time. It was the old Huey, and we'd go fly and pick up patients in the Huey, which some of our female nurses hated. I loved it.
I mean, that's awesome. Come on.
It was like Flight of the Valkyries every day.
I love that.
And then we'd fly fixed wing too, and then you get a really good dynamic on it. You get a good mix of it on the different mission sets. And then my wife was active duty Air Force at the time. We met at the Air Force, and so she got transferred to Phoenix. To Luke Air Force Base. And so when I was moving out there, I got a job offer from the fixed wing vendor that I was flying with at the time, Critical Air. And they said, hey, we have bases out there. You want a job at the Navajo Reservation? So I went to the Navajo Reservation. I flew out of there for a while, dirt runway, really, really rough conditions. And then I was there like maybe 6 months, 8 months, and then my manager quit. And then so next thing you know, I was next up. So real quick, I was put in a position of authority on this crew and this base and this mission.
Being flexible.
But you know what? It's an opportunity, right? So there's an old saying, opportunity favors the prepared mind. So, you just got to be ready for it. And, I ended up being the base manager. Things went well. Then all of a sudden I was like, you know what? I want to do rotor. So then we had University of California, San Diego had folded. It was Life Flight. They had folded their program. It was around 1994, 95, I think. And then they transitioned to Critical Air Rotor Wing there out of Montgomery Field in San Diego. and it was all 206s.
Yeah.
And so they kept the same medical protocols, medical leadership, and a lot of the crew members flew. We started flying in Arizona, New Mexico, California, Washington State, and then eventually into Texas. And so got an opportunity to do that, opened up 11 bases in Texas, and then got hired by San Antonio Airlife. And it was one of those deals where San Antonio Airlife was a legacy program.
They really
and,
were.
you know, where you actually have to, someone has to die, you know, for you to get a position
seriously.
there. And it was a very intimidating program to go to because there's people there that have been there since the inception.
What was the aircraft that you were flying in?
412.
Yeah, the 412.
Yeah.
Dual patient capability, right?
Actually, 4 patient capability in case of a mass casualty. We had these life port elevators on the side, so you can actually carry 4 patients. We never did. The most we ever did was actually, it was funny, not funny, haha, but funny, interesting, is that we flew during one of the hurricanes. We went down to UTMB and we were helping evacuate their NICU. And we had the feeders and growers, so not the critical NICU guys, but the ones that were they were fattening up, that they were getting better. We had 9 souls on board when we called off that day, and everybody, because we had all those kids lined up on these on the litters, and just to evacuate and bring them to Children's Hospital in San Antonio.
It's incredible.
Yeah, so it was a good program, great mission. You know, you get really spoiled when you're in an aircraft that it is like a pickup truck. You know, the 412 is a beast. And we could fly anywhere, and it had a history. You know, the San Antonio Airlife actually responded to the Branch Davidian
Interesting.
event. Yeah, that predated me.
Good old David Koresh.
Yes, and so they had a story to, you know, for a while in Texas, it was San Antonio Airlife, Care Flight in Dallas, Fort Worth, and then Herman in Houston. Those are the big 3.
Yep.
And you know, good luck getting hired there. You know?
It was all locked down.
Absolutely.
Yeah, certainly. I think one of the nurses I flew with, Dawn, I feel like she was at Airlife for a long time. I don't know if that name, I forget her last name, she's with an F, but very storied program.
Yep.
And in fact, I was going through, I was flipping through TV channels kind of recently, and something came up, and it was like San Antonio Airlife, and it was like,
it was Life in the ER.
Yeah.
They were on an episode of that. Did you remember that TV show? It was like a documentary.
I was watching it, and it was like old school. I'm like, oh God, that's where I saw the dual cots or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my God, like it was pretty cool. And that.
This is for those that are ready to launch their helicopter career training. Hillsboro Heli Academy, the place where pilots from around the world begin their journey. With a real-world experience and a reputation that speaks for itself, visit flyhaa.com because it's different here.
That was pretty cool. They actually did a whole bunch of really cool programs, storied programs, which are no longer around, like Samaritan Aerovac out of Phoenix.
Yeah.
They used to fly BKs, and you know, essentially what happens with any industry is essentially there's going to be consolidation, right?
Yeah, of course.
So if there's a big consolidation happens, so a lot of those programs are gone. They're rolled up into either Air Methods programs or a GMR program.
Yeah, they get absorbed.
Yeah, they get absorbed, and actually you have inefficiencies that occur, right? And then you get lean, and I think you get better, you know. But then, you know, there was a period of private equity comes in, and so that's a controversial subject you can talk about on another day, not today. But you know what? And then, but you know, you hope that the product itself does not suffer. You have good, sound clinical training and crew members, and also good SMS programs with open dialogue where someone can say, "Guess what? We're not going to take this mission." You know.
Well, this is, you know, I find it interesting. You join the military, you become a medic, then a nurse, then you're flying civilian air medical, and now you're at Bell.
Yep.
When did that transition occur? What was your official title?
Yeah.
And you mentioned kind of consulting for air medical, but let's just dive a little bit deeper into your day-to-day.
Yeah. So I was flying air medical, and actually I was flying for Airlife. Airlife got bought out by Air Methods. Soon after that, I got an offer to fly fixed wing with AirMed, and actually it was called Air Medical Limited in San Antonio, flying fixed wing. So I went over there to help them with BD and kind of grow their business. Next thing you know, they were bought out by AirMed International, which is part of GMR. And now I'm out of Birmingham, and I'm like double billeted. There's a couple of guys, we're all kind of doing the same job. And I've known Denise, the CEO there, for a while. And, I felt like I don't need to be here. These guys are doing a great job. And I figured like they're just throwing money away by having me there too. Okay. So I got a job back at the hospital, the trauma center where I came from. That was one of the partners of San Antonio Air Life. So I went there and I started.
Where is that?
It's a university hospital in San Antonio.
Yeah, university.
Yeah. So
landed there many times.
Absolutely.
Three pads, right?
3 pads now. Yeah. Yep. And so I was there doing strategy and business development, and a lot of my job there was doing taking physicians out into the community and doing educational events for other physicians to help increase our referral patterns. It was a great job. I really loved it. Had a really good boss there. Bell Helicopter calls me out of the blue. And it was one of my old RSMs, that regional sales managers from Bell, that we had bought after we got out of the 412s. We bought the Bell 430s, and we were supposed to transition to the Bell 429s. And they said, hey, we just lost our EMS segment manager, HEMS segment manager. She retired, and we're looking for somebody. And I was like, hey, I got 3 or 4 good names for you. And it was Pat Foley. This guy's name was Pat Foley, great guy. He says, I was thinking about you, because you do kind of like, I was thinking a younger guy, or a younger person, that guy. It was like, you need to be the old grizzled kind of experienced guy to be in this position. Sure. And so I took the job. I didn't take the job. I applied for the job, and it was probably an 8-month hiring process.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. There was, as you can imagine,
it's a labor of love.
There was quite a few people that were interviewing for this position. And so went through a couple interviews and background checks and all that good stuff. So luckily I was job offered. And so as the HEMS segment manager, what I do is I'm a brand ambassador for Bell. I represent Bell at events, and I'll give presentations. I'm participating in some of the HEMS education day to day. I'll be on a panel later on to talk about EMS different roles in HEMS operations. And then, but for Bell, what I do the most is I consult with aeromedical organizations in North America and in Europe, where these guys have been doing it for a long time. Not so much. You know what I mean? There's not much I can tell them when they've been doing it for a while. But in emerging markets, I do a lot. I do a lot of stuff like in China, India. I was just in Taiwan. They don't have HEMS there. They're still trying to get that going. I do data analysis with my team. I'm part of a team that has engineers that do mission profiles based on your geography, average temperatures, distance of your missions, and we offer them solutions based on our aircraft, and then I'll go ahead and present that, and it's kind of like the same thing I was doing when I was working for Critical Air, and when we were opening up bases in rural communities. I had to go down to, the city council or the county commissioners and present and say, we want to come into the county and have this service, and this is why you need it. Because you can't just show up, put your placard up. You got to get permission.
Yeah, you got to.
Yeah, and so, just education and stuff like that. And I really, really enjoy it. It does put me, I remember when I took the job, I told my wife, hey, just to let you know, they told me it's 50% travel. And then she started laughing. She was like, okay, 50% travel. So she knew and I knew. So I'm on the road probably about 65, 75% of the year, but you saw my colleague run by here a little while ago, Terry. Terry's my law enforcement and parapublic guy.
I met him before.
And he does a lot more traveling than me because he happens to have fire and law enforcement.
Okay, so.
And as you know, every year globally, we got 5% increase of fire.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Year over year. So there's a lot of opportunity out there. So, but HEMS market is doing good. We're doing good in staying solid in North America as doing very well. We've sold a number of aircraft to some big organizations such as GMR and Air Methods, they're buying the 429.
Yeah, I saw that recently in the press release. Very cool.
And also the 407 is really a really steady sales platform and performance. That the 407 is a beast. It really can do a lot of stuff. And, unfortunately, when we're here in Europe and they don't allow single engine operations for HEMS here. And that's too bad. And, we're trying to ensure that there's an opportunity for operators globally to have that option, because when you're starting up a HEMS program, you're not really sure about your revenue stream. Yeah. And you can't have
it's hard to chew off $9 million,
Absolutely. and it's harder to do that. So if you can start off with a 505 or a 407, that makes it a lot more palatable.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because, if you look at really the data there isn't much data that supports that 2 is necessarily better than 1 when it comes to engines.
Absolutely.
Which I find not super surprising, actually, just because I've been in the industry long enough to know the reliability of a turbine engine, right? And so I think, and I think it's not just like the Europeans only wanting twins for that mission. It's all around. Like, we train for engine failures constantly, but they never really happen all that often, right? But then we don't train for inadvertent IMC enough.
Absolutely.
The things that are actually killing people. And so, I find that it's an interesting mindset that I don't think is really based on fact. So how do you educate on that?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I did give a presentation on that. Like, some of the engineers on my team did a data dig on the failure rate of the 407 engine on 1 million hours of flight time, and it was very, very low.
Yeah,
it's almost insignificant, but it does happen.
Sure.
And so, as you just kind of hinted at just a minute ago, at the very beginning of aviation, when we were in infancy, everything was essentially maintenance and mechanical, right? That was killing us. Yeah, killing us. Now we're super, super safe. We have great engineering. We have amazing products, and now everything is human factors.
Yeah.
And so that's the part I was talking to the Civilian Air Authority in China, and they were trying to mandate twin engine for HEMS, and I presented that the most important part is having a robust safety management system, training protocols for your pilots and your crew members, maintenance standards, etc. This is what makes it safe.
Yeah, that's the safe.
And so it was the data. You really have to prove the data. And so, there's so many things different. Like closed tail rotor versus open tail rotor. You have data to support one way or the other. And at the end of the day, it's just up to the customer. They make the call and they make the decision. And what are you going to do?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting time. I feel like, because I feel like there's more push for single engine ops specific to, say, Europe. I think Canada is even, twin engine, really kind of.
Twin engine, twin pilot. No, they hardly ever fly at night.
It's crazy.
Yeah, they're super, super safe. They're very, very conservative with their flying, and there's nothing wrong with it. If they feel that their numbers they're hitting the numbers they need in a sense of serving their population.
Yeah.
That's all that matters.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, it's interesting. Is that kind of the biggest challenge for you here in Europe?
We do have some entry barriers here in Europe. We have some challenges based on, there's such a huge infrastructure here for Airbus and Leonardo, as you can imagine. They're the home teams.
Yeah,
right?
This is home field advantage.
Absolutely. And so it's really tough for people to come in and say, guess what, I want to go ahead and buy this new aircraft, even though the performance is right where I need it, or it's comparable or better than what I currently have, because I'm thinking about this entire infrastructure I'm going to have to build now, right? Yeah. With tools, training. I got to have MROs. I got to have everything set up here to maintain that I'm in good operations. And, it is tough. I think if we had an opportunity to have a discussion with some of the governments, some things may be able to evolve a little bit more as a U.S. OEM. We are a private company.
Yep.
We're privately funded through our sales of aircraft through Textron, which is our parent company. Here in Europe, what they do is, which I totally understand and I get, is they want to protect what they have here. And so there's a European first mentality. Yeah. And so buy European, buy an Airbus, buy a Leonardo. And so there's nothing wrong with that when the government has skin in the game.
Yeah, of course.
And they want to protect their infrastructures and their training programs and all their personnel. And so that's our challenge. What we really need is that one operator to really take a chance on us and kind of rock the boat.
Are we close?
Yeah. Well, you know what? Every day is closer than yesterday. So, we're in discussions with some programs, and we'll hopefully we can meet the requirements that they need to be successful.
I mean, it seems like the 429 specifically could be a great platform.
It is
for Europe.
It is, but then some areas they have tenders for they have to have a shrouded or fenestron tail rotor because of an accident that happened 15 years ago.
Sure.
And I totally get it. I'm not besmirching that because someone lost their life in a tail rotor strike.
Yeah.
Inherently, though, HEMS is a very, very safe program. And what we do is, when I was on a 206 program, we had a policy that no one went after the end of the skid.
Oh, yeah.
Unless you were at one of us crew members, one of us.
Yeah. Unless you want to get tackled.
Exactly. No one did that. And so just being safe. And, we used to land in really crummy, I'm sure, like, I don't know if you ever landed in Smithville Hospital where the helipad's like in the middle of the parking lot.
Yeah.
And it's the worst. You got cars essentially all around you. Yeah. And then you, not only are you worried about, foreign object blowing and cracking windows, but just pedestrians. Because everybody gets curious when a helicopter shows up.
It's like a magnet.
Absolutely.
Oh, what's that?
Exactly. So we've been very fortunate as an industry in North America with not having fatal tail rotor strikes and HEMS because of training.
Yeah.
And, a lot of the programs make it an annual requirement to do their landing zone training.
Yep.
Training the fire departments, law enforcement, et cetera, on how to land us.
Thank you to our sponsor, Precision Aviation Group. Mission-critical operators and fleet managers rely on Precision Aviation Group as a worldwide leading rotor and fixed-wing MRO provider. PAG provides tip-to-tail solutions in 4 MRO segments: avionics, components, engines, and manufacturing DER services. A single point of contact gives you access to over 150 million in inventory globally, 24/7. Just call 800-537-2778. Precision Aviation Group. Others sell parts. We sell support.
Yeah, we were constantly doing the PRs, going out there.
Good times.
Educating the local, volunteer fire department, the EMS, the community. Mm-hmm. I feel like we were doing that weekly,
Yeah, and then now, you're having to do that as well because of like lasers. People are shooting lasers
I've been lasered
at rotor wing, and it's incredibly reckless, behavior because they don't understand how when it hits that windscreen, how it just
Yeah, I got lasered in Hondo.
Oh, geez.
And we hung out when OCC ended up getting when we could see exactly where the laser was coming from.
Perfect.
So, they got the guy. It was kind of fun.
Yeah, they had I remember there was a Black Hawk transitioning in San Antonio. I remember they were going back to Martindale, and they actually got lasered, and they went down and did the same thing. They just hovered and held until
we had just dropped off a patient.
Yep.
I'm like, we ain't going nowhere, guys. And, my crew supported it.
Nice try.
We thought it was pretty fun,
That's
actually.
good. It takes a little bit of that. You're seeing that all across the country, and it's unfortunate. And it's interesting to me because it's like, we're the good guys, right?
Yeah.
We're helping the community.
It turns out in our case, it was a kid. The kid was like 13 or something, So, kids will be kids, I suppose. But yeah, it's extremely dangerous.
Yeah, and then we're going to see more with that with kids and also with hobbyists, with drones. So we're dealing with that as well.
Yeah.
And,
I think it would happen in the LA fires this year.
LA fire, and also they're in Kerrville.
Oh, in Kerrville, yeah.
Yeah, they got a drone hit an aircraft.
Golly.
So there's a resource that's down on the ground until a maintenance guy gets out there and checks it out, makes sure it's cool, and then you're back in the air.
It's very unfortunate.
Yeah.
So Europe, you're here. We have the 429 actually on display with Air Zermatt.
Yes.
Pretty exciting. What is kind of your objectives at a show like this?
My objectives are actually to show the aircraft and talk about the aircraft and talk about Bell, what we do in our infrastructure and how we're positioned. Around Europe, we do have a lot of resources here. We have a lot of partners that are selling aircraft for us. We have maintenance facilities and support facilities for if you own a Bell aircraft, you can get the parts you need, you can get the maintenance you need if you're not large enough to do that on your own. And so just showing them what our network is and how our infrastructure is built here is a big educational part, because most people don't understand that because Bell's new to them, it's foreign to them, even though they know the name. Because
it's crazy.
That's one of the things
I feel like Bell is almost like Coca-Cola.
I was going to tell you that earlier, about like how half the people that are in aviation, especially my generation and older, they were in the Army, they flew OH-58s, they know those aircraft.
Non-helicopter people, they know what a Bell is, right?
Yep.
It's either a bike helmet or a helicopter, I suppose.
Or if you're in Montreal, the phone company.
Is that also?
Yeah.
That's so cool. This is a funny story. This gal right here, she just waved to me.
Uh-huh.
This is my best friend's sister. The guy was in my wedding.
Right on.
Grew up in Oregon, just outside of Portland, and who do I run into? Of course, it's
a small world, man.
Is my friend's sister. So yeah, it's crazy. Super small world, but yeah, it's it seems like it's Europe is it's education. Mm-hmm. Sounds like that you are here educating. So like in a year's time, how much time are you spending in Europe advocating and educating for Bell?
Yeah, I what I do is I come in and I talk to potential customers, and I rely on our sales team to build these relationships up. And when operators are considering a Bell aircraft, I'll come in and give a presentation on the capabilities of it. We'll do the workup, like I said before, with some of my folks on my engineering team, or on my team that are engineers, and we'll do mission profiles, and then we'll present that to them.
Yeah.
And we'll look at all variables and see if this is what makes it. And are they being truthful with us? You know what I mean? Is this really your range? Because even in North America, I try to get this across too. You want to buy the aircraft that you can do 85 to 90% of your missions.
Sure.
With. You can't do, because I'll tell you, when I was at Air Life, we flew the last patient out of Tulane in New Orleans because of the resources that weren't available. It was a patient on a VAD, a ventricular assist device, that needed the room and everything else the 412 could provide. And so you don't plan for that.
Yeah, you're not flying
to New Orleans.
You're not flying to New Orleans all the time.
Exactly. So don't
worry about that.
Don't buy the aircraft that's going to get you to that, to Omaha.
Sure.
And so, that's what you have to really get people to focus on, that, because this is going to be your bread and butter, and this is what you're going to use it for most of the time.
Yeah.
That 16-minute mission, not the 45-minute mission.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, very interesting. Well, Steve, it's really cool to learn about this position. Obviously, air medical is important for Bell.
Yes.
And admittedly, I didn't actually realize that someone like you existed. I think that's pretty cool. And I think what I like about it is, you walk the walk and you talk the talk. You've been in helicopters for a very long time. You've worked in the back. You understand it, right? You get it.
Right.
And so you can really go and have those conversations. I'm guessing it's a very vital asset.
It really is. When you
Bell.
actually have an operator, even if you're a pilot, if we've still done the same mission, we can still have the same conversation.
You and I can chop it up.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. Well, Steve, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. To our listeners, guys, thanks so much for listening. It allows me to have super cool conversations with guys like Steve. European Rotors has been a great success. The Bell booth, best coffee so far I've had.
Outstanding.
Comes from the Bell booth. I also stole water, so I appreciate that. Like I said, though, big fan of Bell helicopters. We hope to sell lots of continue to sell used Bell helicopters. We really enjoy that.
Well, thanks, Halsey. I appreciate the conversation and the invite today.
Yeah, it's been awesome. Again, guys, thanks for listening to another European Rotors edition of the Helicopter Podcast. See you, Steve.
All right.
Please stay tuned for a final word from our sponsors.
Thank you to our sponsor, Metro Aviation. Metro Aviation, the world's largest family-owned air medical operator, offers comprehensive aircraft services with 140-plus aircraft in over 25 states. The Completion Center installs medical and law enforcement kits and avionics, serving diverse aviation needs including offshore, utility, VIP, and corporate sectors.
This is for those that are ready to launch their helicopter career training. Hillsborough Heli Academy, the place where pilots from around the world begin their journey. With a real-world experience and a reputation that speaks for itself, visit flyhaa.com because it's different here.
Thank you to our sponsor, Precision Aviation Group. Mission-critical operators and fleet managers rely on Precision Aviation Group as a worldwide leading rotor and fixed-wing MRO provider. PAG provides tip-to-tail solutions in 4 MRO segments: avionics, components, engines, and manufacturing DER services. A single point of contact gives you access to over 150 million in inventory globally, 24/7. Just call 800-537-2778. Precision Aviation Group. Others sell parts. We sell support.